Welcome. I'm going to be talking about online aviation today and how to take simulation to the next level, which essentially, for me, that means taking your simulator that you're already potentially using at home, and thank you to Callum earlier for the great introduction to what you need for getting started with flying in general or simulation. And I fly online a lot, so I wanted to really come and share my experiences and why you guys should be flying online and how that will help take your simulation experience to the next level. So the agenda for today is why you should be flying online, what networks are available and how are they different, what network is right for you, a little bit about getting started on the different networks, and then if I get a chance, we'll talk about the ATOP program, which is something that I always like to recommend. Something really quick, since this is being live streamed first. It's my son's birthday today, so happy birthday, Ethan, if you're watching. Just to embarrass you a little bit right there. A little bit about myself. I always like to start with this one because flying can be scary, especially online flying, so don't let it put you off. If you don't succeed at first, try again, right? I'm available on all the usual social media sites. Let's see if that works. Yeah, you can't even see that. Great. Okay, good. So I've been doing a lot of armchair flying, as I call it. I started with Microsoft Flight Simulator 3.0 over 20 years ago, probably even before that, but that's as far back as I can remember. And I switched to Prepared as my platform of choice about 5 years ago. My favorite aircraft that I like to fly is the PMDG 737, typically the 800 series, because I like to do a lot of medium haul flying, like Houston to Vegas, that kind of stuff. It's just fun for me. And I'm actually wearing my official VATSIM shirt today. I am an instructor in the Houston RTAC, which is the Houston Air Route Traffic Control Center on VATSIM. And VATSIM is one of the networks that I'm talking about today. Now, this presentation is completely agnostic to the networks. I don't say you should be flying VATSIM or any of the other networks. I just happen to be a volunteer with VATSIM. In the real world, I do some flying as well. I got my private pilot's license, and that's where my online flying really came in handy because I used online flying with VATSIM to practice my radio communication skills. So that was really kind of cool for me. Got my instrument rating. Finishing up my commercial license. I'm also a drone pilot, and I founded a company called the FlightX Pilot Experience in Austin, Texas. All right, so let's talk about why you should be flying online, right? What's in it for you? Okay, here's my one bad joke for the day. Without pilots and controls, we'd be really, really bored, right? We'd be sitting in front of our screens and not have anything to do. Okay, I lied. That may not be the only bad joke in the presentation. You can become part of a very large, I want to call it bustling online community, right? There's other people already like yourself that are interested in flying online, that want to connect with other people. And go ahead and join those folks, right? They're already out there. There's thousands of people flying online right now on the different networks. So go ahead and check that out. Flying online to me means a lot of added realism because you're not only talking to the computer, you're also talking to other human beings online or out there that are sitting behind their computers that are either other pilots or air traffic controllers, right? So you don't just have Prepared is built in, even though the air traffic control system in Prepared is pretty good, it's not as realistic. You don't get a lot of the, quirks of talking to other human beings online. One of the things, like I mentioned earlier, is it really helped me overcome my fear of talking on the radio. When I first started flying for real, I was so worried about screwing up that I kept thinking in my head over and over, what am I going to say before I hit that transmit button and talk to air traffic control? And for me, practicing online, it took a lot of the fear out of it. My instructor was actually from Germany, so he was very precise, right? You will say just the right things and nothing more, nothing less. So he drilled some really good radio etiquette into me. But again, practicing communications online and talking on the radio is something you can do in a very safe environment, right? Prompted efficient communication, like I mentioned. Say the things that need to be said. Don't, kind of sort of drone on the frequency, because there's some pilots even in the real world that, they'll call in, they'll order coffee, or whatever on frequency. No, if 10 seconds of talking on a live frequency is a lot, right? So you want to make sure that you keep it prompt and efficient, but you also get your point across. Ask for the things you want, ask for the things you need. When you learn to listen to a frequency on the radio, let's say, for example, you're at an uncontrolled airport in your little airplane, and you're trying to figure out, what are other people doing. Listening to online communications, you can build up a mental picture of what's happening. Like, there might be somebody in the pattern flying, there may be somebody is turning base to final, there's other aircraft taxiing, and really just kind of use the online communication to build up the mental picture of what's happening around you. And there's lots of fun group events you can do. So we had an event here 2 nights ago where the VATSIM booth was fully staffed up. We had all of Jacksonville Center and all the lower level controllers were online. So there was a lot of staffing happening. It's just on the different networks put on different events. So this is, for example, this is from VATSIM. In about 2 weeks, Houston is having their big event that they do once a year, where a bunch of us get together in a hotel room in a conference facility, and we set up tables like we do here. And yeah, it's just really fun. And then we have lots of people come and fly into our event. By the way, there will be a link at the end of this presentation with the QR code, so you can either take pictures now or just take a picture of the QR code later to download the presentation directly. And of course, I'll make it available as well through the expo. So at FlightSim Expo, we have different networks are present that you can fly online with. So the 4 big ones are Pilot Edge, VATSIM, IVAO, and Eastern Hops, and then Positive Control Networks. They're all here. So go see the different booths and talk to them and figure out which network is the right one for you, because they're all slightly different, and I'll talk about some of those differences now. Really quick, this is what it looks like for us as air traffic controllers. This is what we see. When you log in with your flight simulator and you call us, this is, for example, as a center controller, this is what we would see, sort of your airplane types and your altitude and your direction of flight, that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to also see, for you guys to see what we see behind the radar scopes. Okay, so the different networks that are out there, and I'm going to specifically talk about some of them that I'm the most familiar with. I mentioned them all here, and these are the networks that are in production today. So for example, POSCON, Positive Control Network, is undergone beta testing, but they're not live today. So I'm not going to talk about them because you can't log in as a regular user today and fly with them online. So the big ones that I'm familiar with, and that's, again, I'm going to focus on those, is Pilot Edge and VATSIM. IVAO is kind of like a VATSIM, and they have a booth here as well. And then in Eastern Hops, they're a network that's been around for a long time as well, but they are limited in how they interact. So you'd have to have FSX from the Steam platform in order to fly with them, because they use the built-in multiplayer function of FSX to connect the different simulators together. VATSIM and Pilot Edge, they use a different type of technology. It scales a lot better, and so that's what I'm going to focus on today. Pilot Edge and VATSIM, the main differences, the key differentiators is Pilot Edge is a paid-for service, and VATSIM is a free service that's run entirely by volunteers. So with that, of course, comes a different level in coverage. Pilot Edge is staffed 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time every day, right? So if you want guaranteed coverage, that is the network you want to go with. VATSIM is, like I mentioned, made up of volunteer controllers. And if, my real job is, I work in IT, but when I work from home sometimes, I have a couple, 2-3 hours, and I sit in front of my computer while I'm working, and I log into the network, and I control. However, there is not really guaranteed coverage unless you do, you go to some of these events. But don't let that put you off. There is lots of coverage, and I'll show you some of the ways and how you can find out where the coverage is at. Pilot Edge has a licensing scheme where, and I'll kind of show the coverage here. This is their coverage map. This is what they cover. So for $20, you get either, let's see if you can see that. No, laser pointer working. Okay, you can either get that little green area, that's Los Angeles Center, but that don't be fooled. That's a really big area. That has Los Angeles, it has San Diego, it has Vegas. So that's a really big area already. Or you can choose the Western U.S., which is also $20 a month, which is that whole big yellow area. And if you want to combine the whole Western U.S., that's $35 a month. And if you, like I mentioned on the previous slide, if you do on the bottom there, if you purchase an annual subscription rather than pay monthly, you get a discount. It's like $40 or $60 cheaper to get, depending on which package you get. But so that's Pilot Edge coverage. They're really good. They have highly skilled air traffic controllers. They get really good training, and they're, like I mentioned, online all the time. This is VATSIM coverage. VATSIM is global. All right, so VATSIM really took the existing air route traffic control centers, as they're referred to in the U.S., and mapped that across. This is what the real-world ATC system looks like, and VATSIM simply just took that and mapped that. So you will have coverage in China, you will have coverage in Europe, you'll have a coverage in South America, and that's all done by volunteers primarily in those countries. Not necessarily. We have controllers that live physically in the UK, but control in Houston because they're sitting online at home. They can control from anywhere. This is kind of what the air route traffic control system looks like in the US. There's two air RTACs that are not in here, which is Honolulu and Anchorage. But we have 22 RTACs in the US. And I work down here in the bottom in the Houston RTAC. Where's my laser pointer? Come on. Down here in this little section called Houston. And that covers from western Texas all the way into Louisiana and Alabama and a little bit of the oceanic region. So to get started with online flying, first figure out your coverage type versus budget. Do you want guaranteed coverage with Pilot Edge, and are you willing to pay for it? Or would you like to maybe dip your toes into it and try it out? Now, that being said, Pilot Edge does have a 2-week free trial program where you can try out everything on their whole network, right? So if you're interested in flying with Pilot Edge to see if it's right for you, check out their 2-week free trial program, absolutely. And that's not a show special, that they have that all the time. Something that I want to stress that's really important is be familiar with the airplane you're flying. It's like you don't learn to drive a car by taking it out on the freeway. You take it on a little side street, and you learn how to drive your car, and then you take it on the freeway, right? Being online is not the place to learn how to fly your Boeing 737, right? We can provide a certain amount of help, but not with how to actually use your aircraft. Because as controllers, we may not know how to use your aircraft, right? So typically, learn how to fly your aircraft before you take it online. That's always a great idea. With Pilot Edge, the process is pretty simple. You create an account on their website, you download their client from their Pilot Center, which is, that client is what connects your simulator to the Pilot Edge network. Right? And so that transmits things like your aircraft type, your aircraft location, your speed, your altitude to the network, so that the network can then pass it on to other people. And again, these networks are really very, they're the freeway. And then you have Prepared and X-Plane and are the cars, right, that drive on the freeway. So you can use these networks with any simulator. It doesn't matter if it's X-Plane or Prepared. With VATSIM, the process is slightly different. You create an account, you choose a region and division, and you download the client. And so here's the different regions. You have Europe, Asia, North America. And then think of, and that I think is confusing to some people, it confused me when I first tried to join, is think of this more as your spiritual home of flying, right? If I'm a part of VATSIM USA, VAT USA, But that doesn't mean I can only fly in the U.S. I can fly wherever I want. It's just sort of what I consider home, right? Because that's where I do most of my flying. So VAT USA is the division that I chose. And then think about, are you flying solo or with a virtual economy, or with a virtual airline or FS economy? There's lots of great VAs out here. Like, for example, I just happen to be a member of Virtual United. They're here at the show. For me, it's fun because I gain, experience and points with them as I fly, and they always encourage you to do your flights online with VATSIM, for example, right? Because, again, they want to further that realism that you get by flying online. And then there's tools, and I have a list of, in the very back of the presentation, of links to tools and websites that help in planning your flight. And I know Ethan later will talk about some more about tips from the pros in the next seminar. And again, I only have about 30 to 40 minutes today to talk about a lot of stuff and how to get started. Each system, like Pilot Edge, has a training system. VATSIM has a training system. So use those systems to learn more about, how to, become a better pilot. And if you're interested in becoming an air traffic controller in one of those networks, VATSIM, Pilot Edge, again, they don't take volunteers, but VATSIM, IVAO, BVA, some of those networks, they absolutely look for volunteers all the time. So come see me afterwards if you're interested in that side of things as well. So some of the basics. By default, when you load up prepared, it'll put you, see that? By default, when you say go to Vegas, it puts you on the active runway, right? So that's a sort of a no-no. What you want to do is definitely load up at a gate or a ramp. So go to gate, Charlie 17 or something like that. Because when you connect your plane to the network and you're on the active runway, there may be other people on the active runway taking off or landing on the network live, or there's other people holding short. So if you just pop on the runway, that's not a great thing, and we'll, as air traffic controllers, we'll politely ask you to move your aircraft. It's just, for the most part, and it's prepared is set up so that you get flying quickly, right? It's not meant for you to, or they weren't thinking about, you connected to an online network. That's why by default that's the active runway. So what I do really is I save scenarios. If I want to fly 737 from Houston, I have scenarios saved where the airplane's already loaded at the right gate and the right configuration. So you connect then using your client. For example, I use a client called vPilot. It's very popular for prepared. Using your call sign and aircraft type. That way the network knows your call sign and your aircraft type. So for example here, I'm connecting, let me zoom in. So I'm connecting as a Boeing 737-800 with the Southwest 4170 call sign. Okay, and then you file a flight plan. Just like in the real world, you put in where you're coming from, where you're going to, sort of what fuel you have on board, and that's really, you do that in the client, for example, vPilot, right? It has a feature for you to file a flight plan, and when you do that, it pops up on my screen, and I can see who you are, where you're going, what your intentions are. Don't be afraid to put newbie in the notes, because even if you're new to flying online, what really helps me when I see a newbie in the notes of your flight plan, I know that you're not necessarily as familiar with flying online, so I can provide more assistance than I typically would, because otherwise I'll treat you like someone who I think has lots of experience doing it. And then file flight plan even if you're VFR in the pattern. So even if you're flying just around the airport, just doing touch and goes, just put that in your flight plan and just let us know, right? So that helps us. Otherwise, we'll ask you if you don't put anything in there, but it's helpful for us to know that up front. And when in doubt, ask ATC, right? We're all there to help you have a great experience. Don't be shy. Going back talk about some of the differences. With Pilot Edge, all the positions are staffed. In other words, if you have a tower in the real world, like at Like at Georgetown, where I fly out of Golf Tango Uniform, which is in Texas, just north of Austin. They have a ground and a tower facility, so Pilot Edge will simulate those positions at all times. So you can call up Georgetown ground, you can call up Georgetown tower, and they will respond. You may be talking to the same person multiple times, but they're working all those different positions for you. Orlando here has a clearance delivery ground tower and approach departure. That's all simulated. And then there is a CTAF, Common Traffic Advisory Frequency for Uncontrolled Airspace. And looking at that, the way to find the correct frequency is, if you look at Georgetown, for example, at the top there's just above in the blue writing, it says, I don't know if you can see that right here, there's that C in the blue circle, that's the CTAF frequency, 120.225. Over here in Taylor, for example, on the other side, there is, the CTAF is 122.8. So this is SkyVector, which is just a website you can pull up that has current charts, and that's where you can find those frequencies. VATSIM is slightly different. They have CTAF, the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency is globally 122.8, and at the moment it's a text-only frequency, right? So there's no talking on that frequency, which will, as far as I understand, will change. But right now that's just it's text-based, and that's where you can kind of say, you announce yourself, where who you are, where you are, and what you're doing. Online controls are listed in your network client, and I'm going to show you a picture here. I'm going to zoom in again. So when I logged in as the Southwest 737, this is again, this is vPilot. This is what I see on my screen. The only controller that was on the line at the time when I logged in was Los Angeles Center. So Los Angeles Center would control everything in their center airspace, including clearance delivery for all the airports, tower, approach, departure. So when I call in, and again, I'll talk about that in a second, how that works, I would talk to LA Center the entire process. And here's how positions are staffed. Clearance delivery, ground, tower, approach, departure, and then center. And it's top down, right? So if center is online, like I said, they'll work all airports within their sector. If approach departure is on, so for example, Houston approach departure, if they're on, if they're the only controller online, they'll provide all the services below. So if you're in Houston on the ground or Hobby, approach and departure can provide services, clearance delivery, taxi instructions, that kind of stuff for you. Now let's say only ground is on in Houston, Intercontinental, they cannot provide ground services for Hobby, sorry, excuse me. So if they're the only controller online, then you just don't have coverage at the moment. I'm going to show you what that looks like as well. So here's a picture of VATSIM in Germany. This is northern Germany. I happen to be from right here in Hamburg at the top there with that green circle in the middle. This is what a program called VATSpy, and it shows you who's online right now. So the blue areas, that's where center controllers are online. The green circular areas, that's approach departure. And then if you look at the airport right here, it says G for ground, T for tower, and A for ATIS. So that means somebody's broadcasting weather information, and then ground and tower are online. So for example, if you were leaving Hamburg, you would call up the ground controller first, get your ground clearance and your taxi instructions. He will then hand you over to tower, and then approach departure, then the center. If you are coming from a uncontrolled, so this airport right here only has tower on, right? So he will provide your ground and clearance instructions and your takeoff clearance, but then when you leave, he'll cut you loose, because after you leave his airspace, you're now in uncontrolled airspace. See, there's all gray, there's nothing there. And I'll talk about that as well. Once you enter the center airspace, that's when you call center and check in with them. And then they will provide you service for the rest of the flight. They will then hand you to approach departure, tower, and ground. Again, this is a picture of Los Angeles Center. Los Angeles Center is the only controller online, so he will provide services. Any airport within the blue area, that's his responsibility. He will provide services for any of those airports. So if you're flying LA to Vegas, you got coverage. So let's talk a couple of things on how to work an uncontrolled airport. So you connect yourself to the network. You get local weather information if it's being broadcast. And to find that information, again, you look to something like a sky vector, where you look for something like an ATIS. ATIS 118.6, that's where you can get weather, or an AWOS, or Taylor, I think, does not have weather, but then Austin Executive has an AWOS, which is an automated weather observation system on 118.825. That's to get their weather. Tune to the CTAF 122.8. Identify who you are, where you are, and what your intentions are. And that's kind of very globally for online communications, or communications in general. That's the principle I use when I fly. So what that would look like is Taylor traffic, Skyline 855 Sierra Papa, taxiing from the hangars to runway 17 Taylor. That's what a normal, also real-world traffic call would look like. Tell them who you are, where you are, and what your intentions are. And then you say Taylor again at the airport, at the end of the transmission, because if somebody tuned in sort of midway through the transmission, they would then have missed what airport that was for. So it's just common, it's a common practice to put the name of the airport again at the end. And then as you're taxiing from the hangars, once you get to the runway, you then make another traffic call, that you're at the runway making a straight out departure. When you're in range, contact an appropriate facility. So for example, let's go back to that other example where the center controller was online. You would then, as you're flying, and that's not entirely obvious when that may be, but I'll talk about that also, is you contact the appropriate facility. So let's say, for example, Austin is online and they have an approach controller online. You would then check in with them about 20 miles out. Don't be afraid to ask. Check in, and the air traffic controller's job is to tell you if you're too far out. For example, for approach, if you're 50 miles out, you call approach. They will tell you, hey, you're still call me back in 30 miles or 10 minutes, something like that. So again, here, if there's an aircraft flying down from the bottom here, if he was flying northbound in VATSPY, as you sort of see yourself approaching, because this is a BU flying, you can see yourself here. As you're approaching this blue line, that's when you'd start checking in with the center controller. Also, if you don't check in when you enter the airspace, the air traffic controller may send you what's called as a contact me request. Just something that pops up in your client says, hey, give me a call. Just, either you don't know you're in the airspace or he wants to talk to you for something. And so the traffic call would be something like Austin approach, Skyline 855 Sierra Papa, 20 miles to the north, full stop with ATIS. The ATIS code would be, whatever weather code is, and that's just so you let them know that you have gotten the latest weather information as well. This is what it looks like at a controlled airport. Same principle, you connect to the network, then you file a flight plan, like I mentioned earlier, so we know where you're going. Again, get the local weather, and then be prepared to copy your clearance down, which means have something to write. Because, I'm going to give you here a sample clearance in just a second, it's not necessarily a good idea to try and memorize it because there's a lot of information. And then when you're ready, you contact ATC. Again, who you are, where you are, and what your intentions are. Simple clearance, for example, I'm going to use Austin here because that's one of my local airports. Austin clearance, 855 Sierra Papa at signature, VFR to the east. That's all you need to say. It's very quick, and like I mentioned earlier, very prompt and efficient communication. You literally are just telling them who you are and what you're doing. And you don't need to say something like, oh, hey, Austin, how's it going? Good afternoon. I'm just kind of here, that kind of stuff. Make it prompt and precise, right? Because the more time you spend on frequency, the less time other pilots have to talk to air traffic control. If you're filing an IFR flight plan, then your clearance would look something like this. Austin clearance, Southwest 4170 at gate 12, IFR to Vegas. Everybody wants to go to Vegas, right? And then you copy down your clearance and read it back. And your clearance would look something like Southwest 4170, Austin clearance, you're clear to Las Vegas via the let's call it the Alexei 2 departure, Alexei transition, then as filed, maintain 4,000, expect flight level 340, 10 minutes after departure. Departure, frequency 119.0, squawk 4721. Okay, who remembered all that? Good, okay, great. No, that's why I said, seriously, get a pen and paper, have something to write, get a notepad, or you know, write it down online, or you know, electronically, because there's a lot of information. Once you have your clearance, you're going to switch to the ground frequency if they're on, or the next higher controller that as appropriate. And then you contact them for pushback, and again, when ready for taxi. So something would look like Austin ground, Southwest 4170 request push and start. They would tell you Southwest 4170 push and start at your discretion, right? So, and then you push back from the gate, you start up your engines, and then when you're ready for taxi, you simply call Austin ground, Southwest 4170 request taxi. Then you'll get taxi instructions, and once you get to the runway, you contact tower. If tower's not online, you contact approach or departure. If approach or departure is not online, you contact center. And just just let them know you're holding short 17 right, and then you'll get your takeoff clearance. If tower, well, after takeoff, if tower is online, you're talking to the tower, they'll hand you to departure or center, depending on who's online. If nobody's online except for tower, they'll cut you loose back to the CTAF frequency afterwards. And if tower's not online, if you're talking to you're talking to departure or center, it's common to check in, as you're leaving about 2,000 feet. So you've taken off and you climb it through 2,000 feet. Call in and check in with ATC and let them know that you've taken off and you're climbing through 2,000 feet. And if you're checking in with departure, it would look something like this: departure Southwest 4170, 2,000 climbing 4,000. Or if center's online, again, you would then call Houston Center. Now, again, Houston Center is what controls the Austin airspace. If Austin departure is not online, don't let that confuse you. This is in Austin, not in Houston. So I have a quick 3-minute video to show you what that actually looks like in action. When I recorded the video, only Houston Center was online, and they were doing all the services for me, so I called them for clearance to delivery. You'll hear me, I got my call sign in there. We are demoing a new audio codec over at VATSIM that's much improved. It was a little fuzzy and hard to hear before for several years. And the new audio codec is in beta right now. It's coming soon, so that'll be great. Again, here's the clearance delivery, ground, tower, approach, departure, and center. Those are that's the layer of who to contact first. If you're leaving, if you're coming in, again, center, approach, the reverse order. And of course, I didn't listen to my own advice, and I didn't write down my clearance, so you'll hear me stutter a bit. My trusty 182 in Austin at the ramp, loading up vPilot and connecting to the network as a 182, and then I have my call sign in there as well.
Sierra 4735. 65 Juliet, squawk 4635. Can you say again altitude? November 4665, squawk 4735. Altitude is 3,500. 3,500. Squawk Juliet.
Houston Center, good afternoon. It's Skylane 6182 Golf on the ground in Austin. Request IFR clearance to Georgetown Golf, Tango uniform.
November 6182 Golf. Houston Center, good evening. You are clear Cleared to the Gulf Tango Uniform Airport at 5 climb and maintain 4,000. Expect 5,000 once the minutes after departure. The next will be with me, squawk 4733.
All right, we're cleared to Golf Tango Uniform as file. We'll maintain 4,000 initially. Expect 5,000 in 10 minutes. Departure 126.95. And say again the squawk for 6182 Golf, please. I didn't write down the squawk code.
Squawk 4733.
4733 for 6182 Golf.
And 6182 Golf, readback is pushing stars at your discretion. You can expect runway 17 left for departure. Austin altimeter is 2997.
2997 and 17 left for 82 Golf.
November 46 air, proceed direct to Ennis, then on course direct to Galveston. South Juliet, direct to Ennis, then to GLS.
Houston, Center November 6182 Golf, ready for taxi.
Wait, 612 Golf, runway 17 left. Taxi via Bravo, hold short runway 17 left, squawk Mo Charlie, please.
All right, 17 left, we got Charlie, and we'll hold short of, correction, via Bravo and hold short 17 left and squawk Mode Charlie. 6182 Golf. So, like you saw, it can, even though for someone like myself who's done it and I was prepared for this video and everything, I still, get a little backwards, but then either they'll correct you, because that's the point of reading things back, right? They will correct you if you misunderstand. And again, don't be afraid to ask, right? We're all just nice people sitting behind our computers. Here's a list of useful links for some of these tools. Not going to have time to talk about the ATOP program today, unfortunately, but I can, talk about that later. And here's that QR code. Feel free to get in touch on all the usual, social media sites. Again, crammed a lot of information into, 45 minutes a day. Thank you guys all for showing up, and enjoy the rest of the show.